Hello everyone, welcome to Community Force webinar. As you all know, my name is Mehreen Mirza and I'm going to facilitate this webinar and will be answering your questions during the Q&A break. We are waiting for our attendees to join, so while we wait for everyone else to join, let us show you how you can use this webinar to ask questions and access the handouts. As you can see, there is a panel on the right-hand side of your screen with an arrow. Please use the arrow that is represented in an orange box to collapse or open this panel. Now all of you have been put on mute in order to avoid any confusion during this presentation. You can use the question area to type in your questions and click on send or enter. We will receive your questions and answer them by typing them in or verbally during the Q&A break. If we miss answering any of your questions, we will send you the response via email after this webinar. Also, a copy of today's presentation is available in the handout section. Please click on the PDF copy by clicking on the title of the handout as shown here. This handout contains links to individual help guides, knowledge-based articles for each of the topics that we are covering today. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, we do understand it is Thanksgiving week, but anyhow, since most of you have joined, let's proceed. So the topic for today's webinar is review of specialized question types. We have with us our trainer, Christine Smith, and she will go over all the relevant areas under this topic. The duration of this webinar is 1 hour. I will pass over the mic to Christine. All yours, Christine. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you very much, Maureen, for that nice introduction and getting us started. So, of course, on this webinar today, we're going to be covering a brief overview of some of the question types that we have that many of our clients are asking questions on, and as well as some of the questions that aren't commonly used, but we do want to make sure that you do know that functionality is available. And so it may be something that you may find helpful in your specific processes and collecting your data, and something that can help you. So hopefully you can benefit from today's session. And so, of course, then who does benefit? This is going to be any of our administrators responsible for creating questions in your application form, as well as building out your application forms. Since these are the specialized questions, then of course, those that would be building those questions would be of benefit in today's webinar. So the different types of questions we're going to be covering are some of the special ones that aren't used a lot, and just kind of give you a nice overview. Now, we did say that this was going to be an hour session. We're going to try to keep it within an hour, but we do have a lot to cover. So we may go over a little bit. So we do apologize ahead of time if we do that. And if we do seem to move a little bit fast, know that at the end of today's session, the guides are there that will help give you some more additional information as well. The links to the guides will be available. So the questions are going to be the file question, and then we're going to talk about the float, numeric, and currency. Those are three numeric fields. What's the difference between them? How do you use them? And then also the calculation, where you can use calculations on those three fields. And then we'll talk about the date-day validation question. What's that? You'll learn. The date difference, that's another date field that you might find beneficial. The dependent dropdown, encrypted fields, how can you create encrypted fields? Organization validation, so if you're a grant user, we do have this set up on the scholarship site as well. But if you want to validate a nonprofit organization, like maybe go out to GuideStar and do an organization validation, we'll show you how we do have functionality to be able to do that. If you have payment associated with your application form, we'll show you how to create that functionality in your application form. Then we'll take a quick break, and then at the end of the break, we'll cover the thank you letter question type, the application link, the drop down with file downloads. So you might want to know what that is. That's kind of an interesting little field. If you need to provide multiple documents to individuals and you want to give them a drop down of those documents for them to pick and choose which ones they want to collect, that'll be interesting. And then the data table and repeater, those are similar functionalities. So how do you build those and what are those used for? URL, program name, tuition date, and physical signature. So the program name and tuition date, we do have, it does say grants and scholarships. Those are available on both sites, but we will, when we are going over those, will be on the grant side for the program name, and then the tuition date will be on the scholarship side, of course. And then we'll explain how those are used. So to get started, since I did say we have a lot to cover today, let's go ahead and move along. The first one we want to talk about is the file question type. So what is the file question type? Well, the file question type is that question type you use when you're collecting a document from an individual. So let's say you want them to attach a letter of reference, or you want them to attach a budget if you're a grant user. You're collecting that document, and so in order for the system to collect that document, you use a file type question. So they get a little browse button, they click it, and then they can upload the document to the specific application form. So there are some caveats when using that specific question type. And so it's important to note that there's a size limit for those uploads. And that size limit is 10 megabyte per section. So if you have a lot of documents that need to be uploaded, you want to take that into consideration, because if you get more than 10 megabytes per section, you are going to have issues within that section and within that application, and that applicant having a difficult time uploading them. So if you do have a lot of questions, then it's best that you create those uploads. Like if you only do like a couple per section, or if it's a large document that they're going to be uploading, just do that in its own section. That way you don't have the issues with the resources being used up and them not being able to get those loaded. So let me go to the site here. I'm going to start on the scholarship site. And as with all of our training sessions, when we invite scholarships and grant users to our platform, to our webinar, then it is the same platform. It's this different language, of course, but the functionality works on either the grant platform or the scholarship platform. So with the question type file, just to kind of quickly show you how it's built, if I go in here to my application form and go to the One-to-Many demo app, here, and go into application settings, because of course that's where you're going to be building these questions, and then go into, I'm just going to go into my financial section, because I think that's where the majority of my questions are that are built out. So here you can see this is where we're asking them to upload a copy of their FAFSA. So when we create that question, we are going to be choosing the file type file and the listing of different types of questions. And then over here is where you then determine what type of file can they upload. So if you just want a PDF of a document, you don't want them providing a Word or an Excel, you just want the PDF, then you would just only select the PDF. If you just wanted an Excel document, you didn't want a PDF, but you wanted the actual Excel, then you would just select Excel. And then of course images for photos, and then Word documents, of course, are those Word documents. So those are the extensions of the file types that can be uploaded to the specific application form. Depending on what you select is what they can upload. So that's the file question type. Now the next three question types we're going to kind of group together because they're very similar, and we get questions on what's the difference. So we have a float, a numeric question, and then also a currency question. So with the float question, that is more a question where it's a numeric question, but it's maybe more of a scientific equation that that number is going to be used in, or there's a floating decimal. Like for instance, maybe it's a GPA and they could do a 4.0 or a 3.99 or a 3.5. So there's different areas where those decimals could go. Then a float is more likely going to be your best bet, especially if you're going to be running calculations on them. And when you use a float question types, I'm just going to kind of go in so you can kind of see when we select them, some of the different fields that will open up. So with the float here, when you select it, it's going to let you put a minimum value and a maximum value. So that's a range. If you're looking for specific numbers within a range, then that's when you would use those, or you can leave those blank. So that's the float question. Now the next question, numeric question, that's if you're using arithmetic calculations and you want exact results, then you're going to want to use numeric fields. And of course, also with the numeric fields here, if I choose numeric, you're going to see what opens up with those, that specific question type when you select it. What are the options? So here I select numeric, and you're going to see I have a minimum value and a maximum value, so I can give them a range, but I also have the maximum length. So if I was wanting a year, maybe I wanted them to put in 4 digits, and I only wanted them to give me a 2-digit year, so like 23 or something like that, I could actually put 2, and then they could only put in a 2-digit figure within that minimum maximum value. One thing, if you do use this for like a GPA and you're wanting to force just 4 digits on that GPA, so let's say maybe I wanted a 4.00 instead of just 4.0, please note that the decimal is counted as a character. So if I wanted something to be like maybe between 1 and 4.00, I would make that a 4-digit maximum length because of that specific figure there. Okay, and then if you'll notice here, it doesn't want the decimals because it's only numeric data that can go in that. But that is something that I did want to make note, though, because some people try to put a character of some kind or maybe a comma, and then that counts that as that length. So that's the maximum length is 4. So that's numeric. And then the other one is currency. So the only thing with currency is it's just like a numeric field, but when they enter the values, it's going to put a dollar symbol on that specific field. So of course, currency, if you select currency, you're going to notice it does not have a minimum or maximum amount. It only allows the currency, and then it's going to put the dollar sign or whatever you put as your symbol. So of course, if you're in the UK, you're going to get the pound symbol instead of the dollar sign, but that's all based on the site setting that was set at the time of your site, and you're the administration. So of course it's going to know, put a dollar sign, put a pound, what that symbol is that you're using in your current country. Okay, but that's the currency. So all three of these, float, numeric, and currency, can have calculations ran on them. However, it's important to note that when you use the calculation field, that they all have to be the same type of fields. You can't do a calculation on a numeric and then a float and a currency all within the same calculation. It has to be different calculations. You can't create them on different fields. So to create a calculation, so I'm going to go back out here. So I do have one created already. So I have this question in financial information. So I have these 4 currency fields, and I want a calculation that totals them all together so that I can get the grand total of the amounts that they're requesting. So here's this calculation, total additional sources of funding. So it's going to be its own question. And then when you create that question, you're going to select calculation as the question type, and then you're going to enter the formula. So there's a little field right here that you can click on to enter the formula. And to enter the formula, you're selecting the section that the question is housed in. So it wants to know what questions are you tallying together. And then over here is where you're then going to say, okay, what's the field that needs to be added in there? And then you put, is it a plus or a minus, or is it a times or a division? And then you to the next question, and then you enter the next question you want to combine into that calculation, and then you just keep adding them. And then of course, when you get done to the end, there's no operator because I didn't add a field, but I do have this field that I want added in. And then you click save. And then once you do that, the calculation field will be there for the applicant to complete. And then how does that look to the applicant? If I go over here to manage applications, and I pull up an applicant here that has that completed. Okay, so there's the fields together here. If I wanted to add some more, of course, those fields would appear, but then the applicant, what they would do is hit this calculate, and then once they hit the calculate, it's going to add up the figures that were entered in the fields that were part of the calculation requirement. So that's a calculation. That's how that works. The next question is going to be what's called a day-date validation. So this question is used if, for instance, you have a certain incident and applicants, maybe you want to create this question because you want to know if they've got something within the next an incident within the next 30 days, or it's 30 days ago, depending on what you're looking for, that it had to fall within a specific date in order to be eligible for something. Then you can use what's called a day validation question. And when you create that, the system's going to look at the date range by numbers. It's looking at it a number of days. So if I have a minimum maximum 1 to 30, it's going to say, okay, is it 1 day to 30 days out for that incident? And then it's going to allow them to apply if it falls within that range, or allow them to continue with that question. If it's not within that range, they're going to get a red error message on that question telling them that it has to be within a specific date range. So here, if I go back, actually, here's the question built. Since we're here, we'll just kind of show you what it looks like for the applicant. So it says, please enter the date of the incident. It says, note the incident must be either 30 days before or at least 30 days after today's date to be eligible. So it's either 30 days before today's date or 30 days after today's date. And so, of course, since this says 5/15/22, when the applicant enters this, so if I do 5/15/2023, and tab out, right now it doesn't give me any message. But when they go to save that section, then it won't allow them to save that question because it gives them the message that says, please select a date between 2, and then letting them know that it has to be within that range in order for it to be eligible. Okay, now if it was within that range, so if I did a date like then it should allow them to take it, and then they would be able to proceed and go forward from there. Okay, so that's what it looks like to the applicant. That's how it functions to the applicant. So then how does it get built? So if we go here to application settings and go back into that section where that question was, and it was the question here, we got date day validation. And we did the question type here was date day validation, and then minimum 30, maximum 30. So that's where you put the range of days so that the system knows how many days to count forwards or backwards for them to be able to enter that date that's eligible. So that's date day validation question type. Now we also have a question type called date difference. So the date difference question, it requires 3 questions to be built. One question is they enter a date. The second question, they enter a date. And then the date different question is the third question that's built, question type. And you tell it, you run a little calculation and tell it to look at the 2 specific dates and determine a specific occurrence or a specific date based on that, like a number of days or something to that extent. It's going to look at those 2 dates and then make a determination. So to build a date day question, you can see here we have the date day, oh, wrong question here. I need to go to academic. Sorry about that. Into the academic information section. we actually have 4 questions built for our specific scenario. If it lets me into the section, there it goes. So we have here, we have the begin date, the end date, the date-day difference, and then based on what the result is in the date-day difference, we have a logic where we want them to have a question or a statement given to them. So this is saying that they have a beginning day of their break in education, an ending date of their break in education, the total months that that date was, that break was, and then it's telling them that you can only be within 24 months to be eligible. And then they would get this message. So this logic question here, where they get the message, just so you can see, it's built on the date difference is greater than 23, then they get the message. So you can see how you can build these 2 questions, and then based on how they answer those 2 date questions, then they can get a message depending on the time frame that it falls within. So we have these 3 questions actually build the date difference, and then this 3rd question is where you can have one where if you want, you don't have to do it, but just so you can see then how if it's within a certain total, then they can get a specific message given to them. So let's go look at it from the applicant's perspective, just so you can kind of get a good visual of what is happening there with that. So here's where they're entering the beginning day of their break in education, and then the ending date of the break in education. And then what happens is it's kind of like a calculation field. It has total months of break, it has date difference. And then they hit that, it looks at these 2 dates, runs the tally, and then it puts in total months of break 24. Now, of course, if it was longer than that, if we made it like this 23, and then I hit tab and I come down here and hit date difference, maybe this isn't, there you go. You see how it changed it to 37 months. And then depending on what they enter, then they would get the well, they should be getting the message. I don't know if I'd entered the right range in there or not. Okay. So to build that, of course, though, I do need to show you on that date difference how you run the calculation. Here. It's the question type. And on that date, so the date questions, when you build those, of course, when you build those as date question types. So you're going to pick the question type date, so the system knows it's a date. And then when you build this one, the date difference, here, you're going to first select the question type, date difference, and then a couple fields are going to come up. So date difference type, what is it it's looking at? What's the type it's looking at? It's month. And then this one here is where you're going to add the dates that you're looking at. What's the first date? So there's the question section. And then this is the question field. And then you're subtracting. There's the question, and then you're subtracting, and then here's where you run that calculation so it knows what it's looking at. And you can see you can do multiple fields on those dates to have it run the calculations. And hit exit, and then this is how you would build that. Okay. Now we have the dependent drop-down question type. So what is a dependent drop-down? A dependent drop-down is a question type. So think of a drop-down question type. So a drop-down question type is when you're giving them a list to select one item from. So like state. So you give them a question called state, and they get a whole list of states, and they can select one of those states. A dependent drop-down, however, is a drop-down question that is dependent on how another question was answered. So let's say we have that first question, state, and they choose the state of Virginia. And so when they choose the state of Virginia, I want, when they get to the city field, for them to only get the city listing for Virginia. That way that I can give them a listing of cities to select as well. And based on the state that they chose, they're getting a listing of just those cities. They don't see all the cities across the US. They're getting just the city based on that state question. So the dependent drop-down question would be dependent on the state question and how the applicant answered that. So if I go back out to my application, I will show you how that's built here in personal information. So here I have my state question. It's a drop down, built just like a regular drop down. There's nothing special about it. But then right below it, I have a city question, and that is a dependent drop down. So when I built the city question, what you do is you build it, and when you add the values here, so you can see right now, it's just a regular question. You can't tell what question it's dependent on. The dependency is going to come here in the value. So I'm going to click the value, and now this is where I'm telling it what question is this question dependent on. And so here's the section, personal information. I'm telling it the dependent question is state, and then the select option. So what I have to do when I build this then, of course, is for each state that they select, I would then start building out the cities. So I only did this on a few just for an example purpose. So let's start with Florida. So select option Florida. So when I create a list then of all the cities that I want to give them. So if they choose the state Florida, then they're going to see the specific cities for them to select. Now it is important, you'll notice I start the list with select, and then in between each value, each city here, we have the city, a tilde, and then the city again. So one's a value and one's a label. And that's important to the system. It needs to have both of those so that it knows what to put in there. So then when you enter this, then you just start adding your cities here, and then a tilde, and then enter it, and then hit save. You always want to make sure you hit save. And then once you've hit save, it's okay to then go to the next grouping of cities. So now let's say I want to go to Virginia. So you do this for every single one of those specific areas. You pick the state, you enter the data, make sure you put select ahead of it here, so that when they get to that, when they select Virginia, they come here and it has Virginia. It doesn't automatically populate it with a specific city. And then you start listing the cities, and then you hit save, and then you move on to the next one. And that's how you build that. So every possible selection that they might choose on the dependent question, you want to make sure you come here, and based on how they answered that dependent question, what's the selection they could have made, and then what's the results that you want them to be able to select from because of that. Okay, and then once you're done doing all that, there we go. Once you're done doing that, you want to make sure and hit save and exit, and then you've got the question built, and make sure you hit save and exit on that specific question. So again, let's go look at it from the applicant's perspective. As soon as it's done saving here, go into manage applicants. Hopefully this one will work. And pull up this applicant here. Go into her personal information. and populate the state. So let's hit here. We have a state here. Ignore this one. This is just a typed in field. This is the one that's the dependent. So right now I have, if I had select, then down here, because this has been saved. Let's just save it here. Okay, now start with the clean slate. So here we have state select, and right now the dependent is select. There's nothing there for them to select because I haven't selected anything in the question up above. So here, if I hit state and let's do Florida. So I hit the state of Florida, and now when I come here, you'll see it's no longer just select. It now gives me that listing, and then I can continue and select from that listing that was given me. So that's the dependent drop-down question. Now the next question type I want to talk about is the encrypted field question. So a lot of times we get calls from our clients and they want to know if they can create a question that's hidden from all the other admins. It's an encrypted question so nobody else can see it. And yes, we do have that capability. We do have a question called encrypted field question. It's text field only, so that's important to know that can only be text. And it's useful for a security question like a social security number. You want the applicant to enter that number in. So remember, text fields, you can still enter numeric characters in a text field. Text fields, you can have numeric and alpha characters. You can't, of course, have symbols, but you can do text fields. And what that is then they can enter the field, they can enter the item, and only global admins will be able to see it. So global admins can go in, they can view the application, they can see it. But what's important to note that it's only protected as long as it's at rest. It's in our system. It's in our system. As soon as you create an ad hoc report and you export that into Excel, because it will put it in the ad hoc report. You're a global admin, you create an ad hoc report, you put that question in your report, you've exported it to Excel, it's leaving our system and it will no longer be encrypted. It will be out. It's out of our system. We don't have control of it, and it will now no longer be a private question because you've put it into that report. So that's important to note, is if you are using encrypted questions, you more than likely don't want to put those into any of your reports because you don't want to be getting those exported, and now that information's out there in the data land. Okay, so encrypted questions, of course, in application settings. I forgot to check this application to see if there was one built, but we will know shortly here. And as long as I'm still in it here. Okay, let me go out and come back in here real quick. Now go back into the build. Personal information. Yes, so here is the social security number. It's an encrypted field. I can click on it. I'm a global admin, so of course I'm going to be able to see it. But here's where you select the question type, encrypted field. You can see nothing else different from the way you build any other question. It's just it now knows that it's encrypted and only global admins will be able to see that when they log in. The next question is an organization validation. Now, it might not be something that a scholarship user would use because it's mainly used for a validation. It's a question type that requires integration setup with your organization software program or a subscription requirement through either GuideStar or an additional plugin through CommunityForce. So if you're using GuideStar, then that means you have to have already purchased a subscription requirement through GuideStar and an additional plugin through CommunityForce to be able to use this. And then once you have the integration setup completed, then this question is going to display in the application. There's going to be a question. I'll show you kind of what it looks like. Of course, I don't have any linkage to any sites right now, but you'll be able to see the question. And then what it does is they'll click the button, and then they're going to then see, based on the plugin and where it takes them, they're going to get a drop-down listing of any pre-approved organizations and the information from that organization that has to be integrated with the site, the Community4 site. And then depending on the integration, it's going to validate the field. Like if it's GuideStar, it's going to look at GuideStar. It's going to say, yes, it's validated. And then it's going to create a drop-down question with pre-populated selection from your database. So it's going to go out, look at that database. It's going to say, yes, it's validated. And then it can pre-populate questions that you have within your application. So how that is built, and of course, like I said, I just have a very bare bone. I won't be able to have it go out to a site and do anything, but I can at least show you that there's one here. I just have Applying School because this was a scholarship site. I know more than likely if you had something maybe going out and validating something, you could here. And so it's just type organization validation, and then it wants to know, and then based on the plugin and the communication you have with the Community4 team, because they're going to be the ones setting this up for you, they'll set it all up, they'll get the validation going, and then depending on the program, it'll give the list of program. You would select that program, and then the system knows that's the program that's going to be used to validate. That's where they're going to be getting that link, that URL link, to go out to that site, look for the data, and then return the results to the system. And so when the applicant is completing that question, they're going to see something that looks kind of like this. And it has a line, it just has here, instead of populating it, they can put the data in here. Whoops. They can hit validate. And then once they hit validate, the system's going to go out to that third-party program, do the validation, and then return the results to the system here and populate the fields that you're linking in the background. And of course, again, that's where Community4, the team, has to come in and build that out for you so that that can happen. But I just wanted you to know it is something that is out there. Something else a lot of our clients may not be aware of is if you have an application form, and within that application form, you require a payment. So in order to apply to this application, you have to pay X amount of a fee to be able to file this application form. So it does, again, require integration with your payment software. So you do have to have a payment software of some kind to be able to link that payment, collect the payment, and then have it return the results that it's been paid to our system. So that is something you're going to have Community4 work with us, and you would need to open a ticket to be able to have it added to your system. But once you have it, there is some setup that is done, and if you're using it, we want to make sure you know everything that gets set up once that integration happens. So of course, the first thing that has to happen is in the administration site setting, there is a site setting to activate the payment functionality. And here, if I scroll down till I find it here, always have a hard time finding it. Then enable payment, yes. I'll find it here. Here it is. Enable application payments has to be yes. And then as soon as you put that to yes, then also you will start seeing in the application form itself that's activated. And then in the application form, you would need to, in the build of your application form, under the application settings, in the general information, you would have a field where you enter the amount that they need to pay. So what's the application form costs? So activating that field on the site setting then makes this field appear. And then this is where you would enter the monetary amount for that application form. And then once you've done that, the final step then is to then build the actual question where you're going to collect the payment. And so in the application settings, you're going to put the section where you want that question to be housed. I actually have it here in my authorization and release. Here I have the question. There's a $40 fee associated with this application. Click here to make the payment. And then to build that question out, this is the question that's going to be going out to that third party. They're going to click a button. It's going to take them out to that third party. They're going to make their payment. It's going to process the payment and then return the results that it's been paid. And then it's going to put on your application form it's been paid. And there's also going to be a column in the Manage Applicants screen here that shows what they've paid, if it's paid or not. So here you're going to select the question type payment. And then when you do that, you do have to add the value of what the payment's supposed to be. So you will need to go in, enter the label and the value. I'm just going to go to the editor here. So it's $40. So this is telling the system that when it processes a payment, process it for $40. Now you can put multiple values. Maybe, maybe it's up to $40. So maybe you have a 20 or a 30 or a 10 based on the type of application they're going in. Maybe you might have multiple different values. You can do that, of course, just so you know that is an option. But this one, this application, it's only $40. There's no other caveats on it. They have to pay the $40. Then you hit save, and then that value is in there. And then now that that question is built, you'd want to make sure and hit save. And then how it would look to the applicant on the applicant side is here. They're going to have this, and this is picking up from that value. So this is the $40. They're going to have a make payment button. They're going to click it, and then it's going to pop up where they can enter their information, click make payment. It's going to go to your third-party site, process the payment, and then come back here, let you know it's paid. It's going to let them know. It's going to enter data in here, letting them know that the payment's been processed. And then you're going to see in the Manage Applications screen, you're going to have some columns here. Right here, payment date is paid, and if it's been paid, it'll say yes, and the date that the applicant paid it. So you'll be able to quickly see if they paid their fee as well. So that's the payment question. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and turn it over to Maureen and see if there's any questions that have come in. Maureen, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Christine. Yes. We do have a few questions regarding the file. My file type is too large. How do I attach this? Yes, that's a common question that comes up to us. So what we would suggest to your applicants is either, separate the document out into two different smaller versions and then upload it. In that case, you will also need to create two separate questions. One could be a required question. The other question could be an optional question, meaning not required question. This in case of the form 990, like some of our clients ask for grant sites, right? So probably add some instructions onto your application in such a case and have them separate the file into two smaller files, and then they can upload it. If there's still a problem, please reach out to us on support and report the issue to us, and we'll help you out with that piece. Okay. My file extension is not, that is your applicant's file extension is not recognized, meaning the current file extensions could be, image files, PDFs, Word, Excel. Apart from that, if there is any other file that you have not selected, as if Christine is showing on the file extensions that are allowed when you create that question, and the applicant tries to upload such a file extension, then please ask them to only stick to the file extensions that you're allowing. Okay, as Christine is showing us under one of those questions. So we would not recommend you to allow more file extensions, because those are the only ones that are present. The reason why we are not going beyond image files, PDFs, and Excels or Word documents is because when you try to download the PDF, right, see the summary of the application, it gets difficult for you to see the downloaded documents. So that's why stick to the ones that are provided in the system, and have your applicants also stick to the allowed formats only. All right, there are some more questions here. Just a second. Okay, I added a calculation question to my section, and all my section data, all my section went blank. Well, in this case, you might want to check the calculation formula. Sometimes the system does that when the formula is incorrect. So check the formula. Please make sure that the formula is correctly placed in the calculation field, and only then the section will start populating. So you have to be very careful with the calculation field. Please make sure that you work it out elsewhere first, and then you enter the formula or pick the questions when creating the formula questions, or the calculation questions. Sorry about that. Calculation questions. All right. Just a second. There is, what would be the information that I could ask in my encrypted question type? Well, sometimes organizations tend to ask for EIN number, right? Maybe you want to keep it encrypted and only visible to the global admin. Sometimes you want to know the social security number. Also, that's a very highly secure number. You do not want anyone else to see that number. So in such a case, you can use the encrypted field. All right. And then we have another question that says, if scholarships are age restricted, can you use the date difference question? Well, Jane, I think in that case, the scholarships, Christian, there is another option, right? Age option in the scholarship general information section, general information. We have an age limit. Jane, if that can be activated, you wouldn't have to go in here. See, minimum applicant age. That should be helpful to you. Does that help, Jane? I can share the help guide with you, the applicant minimum age. But yes, that way you'll have to, yes, sorry,
I'm just going to add that that's only on scholarships, but if they have a date of birth, what it does is in their profile looks at that date of birth and then looks at the minimum age that you put here and then the date of birth at the time of filing.
Yes, thank you so much, Christine. One last question was, someone asked, is the payment field, does it require some sort of a payment or cost associated with it? No, you don't have any cost associated with it. It just requires some sort of setup. A Stripe account key is what is required, and if you share the Stripe account key with us, we'll have that set up. So there's no additional cost associated with the payment process in the Community Force platform. I think that's it, Kristen. Back to you then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maureen, as well. And let's see if we can continue on here. I'm starting to lose my voice, so here we go. Okay, so the next question type we want to talk about here is the thank you letter question type. Let me get some stuff out of my way here so we can move on. And so the thank you letter, we have a functionality called thank you letter. And when you use that functionality, the system, with that functionality, the system has a question that has to be built. And when that question's built, that's to capture the thank you letter data, that has to be built as a thank you letter question. So we just wanted to let you know that there is that option out there. We do have other trainings that go in deeper about the thank you letter functionality, but just to kind of briefly give you an overview of it, I'm going to show you here what we're talking about. In the notifications, so what can happen is you can create this question called thank you letter, and it's an essay box question. And when the applicant answers that essay box, it then puts the question in this manage donor thank you letter functionality. And then you can look at the applicant. you can see all the thank you letters. You can view the thank you letters that the applicant wrote, and then what was the fund that they received funding on. And then after you view that thank you letter, you can then send it to the donor. So of course there's some setup that has to be done for all that to happen. But if you are using this functionality, then when you create the question that's to capture the thank you letter for that specific applicant, you do have to use a question type called thank you letter for the system to know it's part of the function. So when you build that application and you're using the thank you letter function, in the application settings, of course, here I have my thank you letter section. And then in that thank you letter section, I have all of these questions that are thank you letters that are going to be sent to my donors. I'm going to be emailing them after the applicant completes the question. I'm going to email it to that donor myself as the admin. So the applicant's creating the thank you letter, and then I'm going ahead and forwarding it via email to the donor. And so in the fund setup, of course, we do add the donor's information to that fund. And then when we build the question, then on each question, so it's based on, this is a one-to-many fund, so there's multiple funds this applicant could have been awarded. And so based on the awarding, so we do have a section that we build where they're getting the award, they're seeing what they've been awarded, they're selecting that. And then I'm saying, okay, once they've been awarded that fund, then based on the condition, if they were awarded that fund, then show this thank you letter question. And so when I build the thank you letter question, I'm telling the system what the question is, of course. It's a thank you letter question type. And then what fund does it belong to? And this is important so that it knows that this specific fellowship belongs to this specific fund, so that it knows who the donor is, because in the fund build, I'm putting the donor's information. And so this is the fund, and then this is the fund that it belongs to. And then it's a thank you letter type. And then of course, how long can the thank you letter be? It's an essay question, so that's where I'm putting the minimum maximum for the applicant to complete that. So then what happens then? The applicant goes in. Once they've been awarded, they then get this section on their dashboard for thank you letters. And then based on the fund that they were awarded, then they get a thank you letter for each fund that they've been awarded. This specific applicant got awarded 2 of them. They type in their thank you letter here, they hit save, and then that's where, because it's a thank you letter question, the system is looking at it, it's going out, and then it's going to report it in this functionality here. So every thank you letter then they write is going to show here in this listing here. And then I can, of course, view it. I can also edit it, and then I can save it and send it, or just send it without making any changes. If I make changes, I do want to save and send, or maybe I just want to make changes and save. I don't want to send it yet. I can do that. But then, of course, the system will let me know, of course, if I sent it. And then it'll go out to that donor. So that's that. That's the thank you letter functionality. It's a special question type. So you might be thinking, what's that? You see it out there? That's what it's used for. Now I'm going to switch gears, and we're going to go to the grant site for the next few question types, because that's the ones that use these question types, or the majority are our grant users. So it's something we have set up on our grant site, and so I'm going to go to our grant site, but it is also available on our scholarship site as well. So if you do think, oh, that's something I could use for a specific scholarship program I have, that is something you do have the capability to have it added onto your site as well as a scholarship user. So the first one we want to talk about is what's called an application link question. So what this does is you have an application, and maybe you want to pre-vet them before they go down to the second application. So you have an initial application form that they're completing. They're answering questions, and then they submit it. And then you come in as the admin, review that application, and then determine if they move forward. And then what you can do is, instead of having, they can move forward and be directed to a whole new application form to complete. So you're approving them, and then you're giving them a link to an application, and then they click that link, and then it takes them to the next application, and then they can begin applying in that application. So of course, grant users, you might have like a letter of intent. They're completing that, an LOI. You're looking at that. You determine, okay, who's approved, who can move forward. Their program's approved. Now we want more data. So now complete the final recommendation application. So to build that out, you do, of course, have both applications. You build your first application. And so here is where the first application is. This is the review application. And then you also build the second application. And when you build the first one, a lot of times, excuse me, what you'll do is in the first one that they're completing is where you're going to create the link. So here I have my sections that are just their initial ones that they're going to complete. I have a section here, and I create this in a separate section because I only want certain applicants to get it. And so what you do is you put your applicants at a status, maybe selected for an award, even though they haven't gotten an award yet. They don't see that, but that's for you to know that that's the trigger to make this section appear, and then you can contact them and let them know this is here, and then they can move forward. So when you build this section, you're doing selected for an award, so only people that get to that status will be at it. So that's one way you can control how they're going to not get that question, is build it in a section. But then here, when I click on this section, they've been approved to submit, and then they can click the link. So we have a question type called application link, and then this is where we create the link to the second application form. Now in that second application form, I may have cloned it from this application, and then in the cloned version added additional sections for them to complete. Maybe I won't have it in my first intent application, but I'll have it in my second application. So what you can do is all the data they completed up here, if those same sections with the exact clone of those sections, so like what I'm talking about in this one, I have their contact information, I have their agency information, their program information. So what I want is all of this data to flow down into the second application so they don't have to complete it again. You can do that as long as you've cloned. It's the exact same XML, and the questions are the exact same XML as well. If you change anything in the second application, then of course it's not going to clone down when they import down. So what you do is you create the question here, the application link. When you create the application link, you're going to tell the system where they're supposed to go. So you say create a application link question type. What's the application they're to be shown and to start applying to? You select the application that they're going to get pushed down to, and then you can determine when they click the link what happens. When they click the link, they can just get a link and go to that application, and then they'll get an apply button, and then they can apply to it. Or they can click the link and get just a link, and then they have to click the link to apply, or they can click it, go directly to it, hit the apply, or they can click it, they apply to it automatically, and the data from this application is imported down into the second one. So that's what I have here, is as soon as they click the link, it starts the new application form for them. It imports any data that I had from this one into that one based on that XML matching. It's looking at the both of them and comparing, and then it populates it, and then the applicant now has it in their My Applications dashboard. They can log in, see it in their My Applications dashboard, click the new application, and continue on. So how does it look to the applicant? So I'm going to go ahead and log out here. And log in. Okay, so now I'm an applicant. So I'm going to go into my applications and hopefully I can find the right one here. I think it's this one. So this is the initial one. So now here I've got this section. I can click on it. I have a click here. And I had that imply and import. So look what it did. It took me to the new application, started it for me, and now all I have to do is continue with it and finalize that second application form. It's linked me directly to that one. So that's the application link question. The next question type I want to show you, I do have to log out and log back in as an admin now. And go in here. So this is a question type. And what it does is it's a drop down, but instead of a drop down with some words that they're going to select or fields that they're going to select, it's actually giving them a drop down of files. So maybe I have 3 different files, and depending on their specific agency, they get they have certain documents they need to complete. I want to just give them a whole listing. They can grab them, complete them, and then I can create questions for them to upload them to, of course. So it's called a question type that is a drop down with file downloads. And it does also require some intervention by Community Force, because in order to get the listing of files created, you do have to give those documents to Community Force so that they can upload them. Only Community Force can upload files to your site, and then it'll create URLs for those files. And then those URLs are what you're going to make the drop down from, is that listing of URLs. Then depending on what document they select, it'll take them to that document's URL, take them to that page, and then they can download the document, complete it. And then you're going to have a second question, of course, just a regular file upload question for them to upload it, like we talked about earlier. So let me go into the application form here. I think it's this one. And settings, an agency profile. We have a drop down with file downloads. And of course, once it's in there, you're not going to see it. And so I can just kind of show you there's a question type here. And then with the values, this is where you're going to enter the URLs and the scripts, the file locations, all of that gets entered in here, and then creates a listing of all of those files that the applicant has the possibility of selecting. They can select whatever one they want. And so as the applicant's completing it, they'll come to that question. I think I can do it from this one. Whoops. Agency profile. Here right now, so here's that question. You can see right now there's no files for them to select, but then they'll see the drop down, they'll select the document. And then every time they change the document, here it is. This is the document. They can click on it. They then will get the document. Of course, this is just a test site, so they're not going to get you're not going to see what they're going to get, but they would get a document that they can download and complete. And then, of course, what you would do then is then create a separate question to collect that document for them. And then, of course, then if they had another one, they would click the drop down, select that one, get it, download it, complete it, and do what they need to with it. Okay, so that's that question type. So a lot of people might not know that's there. That's a nice little functionality. If you have multiple documents, they don't need to complete them all, and you want to give them a grouping of documents, they can download and then decide what they want to upload. then you can do so. The next two question types are kind of similar, and they're what we call repeater functionality. And so it allows you to create questions. So let's say you have a group of questions that has to be entered multiple times. Like a scholarship user, you may have activities. Please list your activities. You want to know the name of the activity. It's a repeat group of questions that every time they repeat, you need them to answer all of the questions in the grouping. So like for activities, you would maybe, what's the activity? What's an award you received for this activity? What grade of school were you in when you did this activity? That's one example. Our grant users, you may have you received funding from any other organizations? It's a repeater. What's the name of the funding? I mean, who was the agency? How much did you receive? Did you have another one? If you have another one, add another one. For every, you can add multiple with the same grouping. You don't have to create. In the past, you created two questions, and then you created two more, and then you created two more. Now you just create the one grouping of questions, and then you enter that repeater question into the section you want it to be in. They choose how many times they want to enter it. You don't have to keep making questions over and over and over again and end up with a whole list of 100 questions in the background with all that logic. And those of you that use those activity sections and have been using them for years understand where I'm coming from. So at the repeater, there's a repeater question type, which is just a group of questions. Add another, they have an add button, they click it, they add another group. Another add button, they click it, and they get another group. That's the repeater question. The data table is also the same functionality, except what it does is at the top or bottom of the page, it creates a columnized grid that's kind of like a spreadsheet that has columns for each question that they've answered. So I'll show you both of those here. And like I said, we're going to go over time today, but after we get past this, we just have about 4 more quick question types to go over. So I apologize ahead of time, of course, for taking your time, but these are some nice functionalities that you might like to use. So for the data table and the repeater functionality, there are something you do need to do with the build. And so for each grouping of questions, so like if you were scholarships and you were creating an activity, you wanted to start capturing all those activities, you would create a separate section to capture the group of questions you need answered. And it's going to kick me out here. I'm going to have to log in and log back in, I think. Okay. Close that. Go here. Log in. So here you're going to see, and I have for each type of repeater, you do have to create a section. So I have for my grant side, I did a funding. So this is my funding information repeater. And so what I did is I created this section. I made it a staff section. It's a staff section, so the applicants don't see this section. It is a staff section when you build it. And then when you build it, this is where you put the group of questions. So I'm only creating these questions. What's your source of funding? And what's the amount of funding? And then if you had more questions, you can enter those as well. Then once I've created that section with those questions, what's the grouping? I then create the repeater question type. So here's my section I created. Now I'm going to go up here and go into my, I think it's this section is where I build it. Yes. So here I create a question, please enter your funding source. So do you have other funding sources? And then they say, please enter your funding source. Notice here, question type repeater. So I'm building just this one question. That one question is then looking at the question type as repeater. And then when you select that question type repeater, it says what's the section that has the repeater questions built in it. I said it's that funding information repeater. That's where you're going to get the grouping of questions. What's the button? You do want to make sure you show the add button because they wouldn't be able to add any additional if you didn't have that. So it's very important, but it also allows you to create a text for that button. And they will need to click that button after every entry. If they don't click it, it's not going to save. So that's why I say click save to add another. And then, of course, now you've got it built. The applicant goes in and completes it. As the applicant is completing it, I do this every time, and I know you guys probably do it too. Agency sustainability. So here is where they enter the source of funding. I'm just going to do test fund 1, the amount, click to save and add another. Test fund 2, 2,500, click to save. I don't have any more, so I'll leave that blank, and then I can hit save and return to dashboard, and now they have that data. So you see how you can do that? You just build the group of questions, and then the system will create that repeater functionality. Now you can only do one repeater per section, repeater question. So I couldn't do 2 repeaters within this specific section because it will cause issues. So I have this section, and I have within this section that 1 repeater. Now, the other functionality I talked about, which is very similar, is called data table. And I'm going to show you what the data table looks like since I'm here on this page. I actually have it for my program outcomes. And as they're creating it, it's the data table. So it's the same as the repeater functionality. And I'm going to show you, of course, how it's built. But notice here, it has a column for each reply. And then below it here is where they're putting the objective. So for each objective, I want to know what's the outcome measurements. Oops. Try to do this quickly here. Timeline. Throw something in here. And then here, save and add another. And then if I scroll up, there's the data I just entered. And then if they go and they do another one, it's going to put another row and then another row and another row. So for each objective, they need to add that, and then it's going to give me that grid type view. And then I can have this grid show up at the top of the page, which I like, or I can have it show up down below here, but I prefer it to be at the top. And then as they're entering it, it starts showing all the information there. So that's the data table. So it does have just a little bit of a different setup. Again, you're going to create that section just like we showed you on the first repeater. So here I have the section. It's a staff section. I have the section and I have the questions. Nothing's different. Same way as the other repeater. Where the difference falls, of course, is in the section that I'm building it in, where the question is housed. And again, you can only have 1 housed per section. So I'm putting this in my program outs. I created a whole section for it to be housed in. And now here is where I have that question. Here's where I built it. Again, I'm telling the system now it's a data table. And when you select data table, again, it's going to say what's the repeater section. So that's the section that's to be used for the grouping of questions for the repeater. But you also, it allows you to select columns. You don't have to do all the questions. You can just pick and choose. Maybe this time I want these, but the next time I use this application form, I don't want to use them all. So maybe I don't want some of like maybe an output or an outcome or something like that, I can unselect it, and then that column won't be present and they won't need to answer that question. So that's the difference. And then of course the question type here is called data table and not repeater. And then when you hit save, then that's what creates that question. So that's the data table and repeater. Another question we have out there, and this is useful for collecting a URL like a website. So the applicant is forced to enter a URL in this question type, or maybe you're wanting videos. And so your applicants can provide you, maybe they uploaded it to YouTube, they can then provide you the URL that takes you to the video that they have uploaded somewhere by that URL. So they can provide you a URL, and then now you have the link for that video that they need to see, or maybe you have a website link as well. And so when you create that question type, when you're building out your application, I have this one is just a URL right here. It says website. And so they have that URL will be in the application form. I can click on it. All I need to do is just select the question type URL, and then the system knows that that's a URL and they need to enter a URL for that specific question. It won't accept anything but that URL. Another question type that our grant users use, but it is available for our scholarship programs as well. If you have some reason that you might need to use this, we have a column called program name. And with our grant users, it does require in the administration setup, if you're not using it, what it does is in the administration site settings, you do have to activate it if you're not seeing it. And it provides a column for the program name. It's one question. You're only allowed one per application form. And what that does is it then, like, what's the name of the program that they're applying for? If they're maybe applying for different programs and you need to know, okay, this is the Boys and Girls Club, program X, Boys and Girls Club, program A. You can differentiate when you're looking at the application which one belongs to which program. So I have this enable program as yes, and once you enable it, it opens up the functionality. And then of course the applicant will have this and you'll have it on your end where you'll be able to see the name of the program. So like here, if I click on this application, I have this column called program name. And I can see the name of the program real quickly, and I know, okay, they have 3 different applications. I know which one I'm going in on and working on. Easy way to see the name of the program. Like this, they would have to have 1 application per program, of course, and you only have 1 question type that can be this specific program. So then when you're building the question, you would build that question. And where is it in here? Let me think here. I think it's in here. Yes. So here's that question. And then it's a text field question. They see that question. As soon as they populate it, it's going to populate that column on your side. And then they're also going to have it on their side where they can it'll show on their side as well so that they can keep track of which programs they're going in on which application also. So that's the program name. Now something very similar where it creates a column is something that I'm going to jump to the scholarship site now. And some of our clients want to quickly know what's the tuition date so that they know when they have to have this check. So the applicant's being awarded, what's the date that the tuition's due that they need to get this scholarship paid. So that's called a tuition due date question. And on the scholarship site here, if I log in, and this is also available on the grant site as well. If you wanted it activated, you can contact us and we would activate that for you. It is something that we do have to activate at this time. But I'm just going to go on the scholarship site here so you can see that when you use the tuition date question type and activate it, you're going to see a column here of tuition date. You don't have to create a question in the application. You do create the question, but you don't have to open up the application, drill through all the sections, find the specific question and know what the date it's due. You actually have where it can show right here, right on this front page where you don't have to go digging for it. And so once that's activated, then the only other step you need to do is when you build the application form, create the question where you want it to be answered. In the specific application, it's in the award form, so they've been awarded, and now once they complete the award information and provide it, it's there. So here, I guess you have one per application form. Tuition date, it's the question type we selected was tuition date, so the system knows that's whatever they put as a date in that, it's a date field. And so whatever date they enter in that specific field, it's what's going to show in that tuition date field column on the front page under Manage Applications. Nothing, it's answered like any question, other question for the applicant, but it is helpful for you as the admin. And then one final question type that a lot of you might like that may not be aware that is out there is called physical signature. And so what the physical signature does is it's different from electronic signature, and it's different from just a field. Excuse me. It's different than just a text field where they're typing it in. So electronic signature actually allows them to sign, to actually put in a drawing of their signature. And I will show you how that works. So of course, remember electronic signature, they log in, they have to type in their exact profile, first name and last name. Physical signature is a question that is built. And so you can see here, I'm going to go to the build first, and you put it in where you want them to sign. So I have an authorization and release. This is my preview. I've created this upload your official signature question. And I've created the question type physical signature. And then what are the files I allow? I have image. I'm allowing an image file. I can click OK. So they can do one of two things. They can draw it, or they can actually browse their desktop. If they have a signature they can upload, then they can upload that as well. So then I created that physical signature. That's all you have to do to have it. And then when the applicant's completing it, so if I go into this test applicant, and I'm in the section where they need to sign, this might have been the one I entered one already. I have to delete it first. Okay, so here we have here, so they can browse, they can click the browse button, go to their desktop, upload a document, or they can click the signature pad here. This little box opens up. They can enter what they want it to say. They can enter a signature, hit save. Once they hit save, it downloads that for them. I can hit save and return. And then if I do preview, you'll see it's in the preview, and it'll also be in the PDF. And there's where I've signed it there. So that's called physical signature. That's the physical signature. And that's how that works. So now you've got their official signature where they've actually signed it. Now, whoever logs in to that application form that's in that, as you can see, I'm an admin on the back end. I just went in on that Manage Applications and went in and signed it. But more than likely, it's going to be the applicant going in on their own application and signing it. But that is something that you can see. Whoever's logged in that has access to that section will be able to make that signature. So even like a collaboration section, you know, the collaborator, if they have a section they go in, they have to complete, they can sign off with their signature as well. So anywhere you had an electronic signature, you can also use this physical signature. So that's it. We are now officially done. And so I'll turn it over and see what questions came in and let Maureen answer those, and then we'll wrap it up. It's all yours, Maureen.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Christine. And thanks everyone for being patient with us and staying with us till now. Just a few questions that I will answer. Can we add conditional logic to data table and repeater questions? No, because you don't need to, right? The questions will open only when you click on add another, right? So you don't really need to add conditional logic, and that should work fine for you. All right. A few other questions. Does my donor, right, for the thank you letters question, does my donor really need access to the site as a role? No, the donor for the thank you letters will never come into the site and access the letters. It's you as an admin, as Christine has showed, who will be just forwarding these emails. So there's no need for these donors to ever have actual access to the site. All that you're doing is just adding their names, email IDs, where the emails need to be forwarded. So you don't have to worry about adding these users into the system and creating special role types for them. Okay. And just a second, Christine. Program name. Now, as Christine has mentioned, program name, yes, definitely. Someone had a question, can I use program name on my scholarship site? Well, if you have a process such as maybe a parent is applying for a scholarship for their kids, right? High school seniors, they can be applying for scholarships in a college, your university maybe. Then they can be working on their children's names. Their names could be counted as program name fields. Remember, there can be only one program name field throughout your application, so you cannot use multiple. And then we had a question, can you include more than one URL link in a section? Absolutely, yes. Where program name can be only one, more URLs can be multiple, so it's not a problem at all. Just a second. I think I've covered all the questions, Christine. I will probably stop and wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving from here. And I'll get back to you, Christine. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you so much for that. And so that does wrap it up for today's session. Again, we do have the links to the questions that we covered, the ones that have guides in Zendesk. We do have those. Click here links, so that will take you directly to the Zendesk URL. So make sure you get a copy of today's handout. And then again, I thank you all for taking time out. Like I said, we had a lot to cover. And so hopefully you got a good overview of some of those question types that you might have had questions on. And so if you do want to have one of our client support specialists reach out to you to maybe go over your processes and see how these questions can maybe work for one of your processes, then we can go over that with the support specialist. You can go to Zendesk, enter a support ticket, and ask that one of them reach out to you and schedule a time to meet with you for a process review. And so that wraps up our session. We hope everybody has a wonderful day. As soon as you log out, there will be a survey that pops up, and as well as the same survey will appear in the follow-up email that we always send to you. So please fill that survey out. That helps us see, one, how we're doing as trainers, as well as also what are some topics that you want to learn about. So we have these topics, we prepare these webinars, and so we want it to be of benefit to our clients. So please give us your feedback as to what you might find as a nice topic, something that you're maybe struggling with that you want to learn more about. And then if we have enough people that are looking for that same type of thing, then we can also schedule a webinar to cover that. Or if we see if it's not something that everyone else may need, we might even reach out to you. We will reach out to you and see if you would like a process review to discuss it in more detail. So thank you everyone again for your time, and you all have a wonderful week and enjoy your time off. And thank you so much. Have a very good day. Thank you.